We're finally here, and the Resident Evil 5 review that I said I've been meaning to do for a while, but of another when I got distracted and played a visual novel, sunk like 50 hours into this, and I had to make a review of this visual novel first because otherwise I'm gonna start forgetting the details. And since unlike my regular reviews, which are of normal video games, this is about a visual novel, which is mostly just reading text and pressing next. The story is the main component here, so if I start forgetting details of the story, I'm not going to really be able to give a good and accurate review. And for that reason as well, this review is mostly going to be focusing on the story, since there's not really a lot of gameplay to analyze here. Usually in reviews that's the biggest part of my analysis, but in a visual novel obviously it has to be the story, the main focus. And well, as you saw from the title, the visual novel I'm going to be analyzing today is the Sekimeiya Spun Glass. I actually bought it last Friday and finished it on like this Tuesday. I like sunk 59 hours, if I'm not mistaken. I'm remembering it wrongly. 59 hours in like 4 days, and went from beginning to end. And well, despite that extreme amount of time I sunk in a very short period, you'd assume that I really liked it, and I was, very surprised positively by what was going on, which is why I was glued to the screen. And while there's definitely some elements of it that were definitely intriguing, you're probably going to find my review a little bit to the opposite end, generally. But, well, let's start first with a general overview of the visual novel. I'm not really going to be focusing on any spoilers. When I start getting into the story in depth and start talking about spoilers, I will warn people. So if I mean, this is just general stuff. I mean, like I said before, the story is the main part of a visual novel, so it's kind of hard to really, suggest anything for the people who don't want to get spoiled. I mean, it's kind of hard to do anything with this preliminary review that I'm gonna give you, but anyway, we'll start with first things first, the interface. The interface is pretty decent as far as visual novels are concerned. I'd say it's probably one of the better ones. From all the visual novels I played, I think the interface is nice. The UI looks pretty clean. It's pretty nice to look at. There's a lot of save options, which is actually something you might surprisingly find annoying, that there's a lot of visual novels that decide to skimp out on save slots. And it's especially annoying in visual novels with a lot of options. This one you actually have a lot. You're not gonna miss out on it, even with the ridiculous amount of so-called choices. We'll get into it later, where you have more like than 150. Maybe not 150, but definitely more than 100. You can just save on every single one of them and still be left with like half of the save slot, so that's pretty good. Another thing that this also has, that it's the first time I ever saw in a visual novel, and I think more visual novels should start doing this, especially visual novels on the mystery genre like this one, is the tooltip to localize words. You have a specific tooltip. You basically put a word that you want to see, and it basically shows you all the instances of the word from the text you read so far, which is pretty good for you to go back to a part you want to reread or reanalyze or something. It's very fast going back like that. It also instantly allows you to go back to certain parts of the story, like if you select the specific dialogue option, you can go ahead, tick that up, and it brings you all the way back to that specific part, so you don't need to be constantly going back to the beginning of the game if you want to, or saving at every point. If you want to go back to reread some sections, you can just select the text in the menu and you go instantly back, which is very good actually. I think all mystery novels, and honestly all novels in general, should have this. All visual novels should have this, and learn a little bit for this. That's a very good Good idea. You also have the a very specific area which is focused on important information, though to be honest the game doesn't really notify the most relevant information. Yes, you have a general idea what's going on in certain parts of the story. The game notes that for you, and it keeps that saved throughout every point of the chapter. However, I mean, the information you get from the game is actually not that good. I mean, it's very generic. It doesn't account for very specific details. Though, for those, you actually have a noting section where you can keep notes for specific parts, though. I mean, I highly doubt most people at visual novel this long with like at least 50 hours taking a lot of notes eventually. I mean, I did start taking a few that I thought were relevant. That ended up being kind of irrelevant. I mean, they were relevant in a very back-ended type of way because I was thinking about the mystery of the story in a very different way than what the writers had in mind for what the mystery was going to be like. And I'm gonna be getting into that when I get to the story section. But yeah, you have a note-taking section again. You could always take notes like I used to do in my notepad, but I guess it's also a good thing to have it in the game itself. Also separated by, specific sections of each chapter to make it easier to organize. So that's neat. Even if you're taking notes, very long notes, like just copying and pasting dialogue, it's gonna end up looking very weird because I mean the notes section is very small, so you're gonna be stretching that thing very deeply, and it's gonna look weird. But overall, it's a positive. Then the music is also decent. It does a decent job at creating atmosphere. There's enough variance in the musics and the tracks um, to keep you entertained for a while, though they obviously end up becoming a little bit old after playing the game for 50 hours, the especially the ones related to more tense moments in the story. Like those start appearing a lot, like the ones where the main character is thinking about something or making some theories. They appear a lot, so you do end up getting a bit tired of them after a while. And some of them I feel like were not used enough, like one of them being the slice of life music. You don't really listen to that one a lot, even though that's probably one of the best ones, in my opinion. Another thing they do fairly decently, it's actually something that I don't think I remember a lot of other visual novels doing, is they actually just cut off the music entirely when they want to create some tension, and I think it works. Like, for some reason they made the first elevator ride extremely tense. Whenever you get into it, the main character talks about how the elevator is giving him the creeps, and it's so silent, he just keeps staring into the wall. It takes a long time as well because it's going from floor 1 to floor 6. And I don't know, they made that moment extremely tense. I don't know why they decided to do it, but they made the regular elevator ride extremely tense. So they do use the removing the music as well to create tension, and I think they do it fairly well. As for the sprites, they're okay. They're not bad, but they're also not really that great either. The design quality is probably like average. It's definitely better than you would see from most indie studios. I mean, it's definitely acceptable, but they are definitely not high quality sprites. I'd say the the design quality is not that good. I mean, you can basically tell whenever you get the full spreads of the characters, they look nothing like the sprites. I mean, the design quality is really not comparable. And they also don't really have a lot of variance. You have like 3 sprites per character, so you're kind of limited in the emotional range you get from the characters. Like trying to convey emotions, you kind of have like the regular sprite, you have the surprised sprite, and then you have the sprite where the character is kind of like shaken up, and that's all the sprites you get for each character. And it's kind of like, I mean, there's several moments where they don't really feel like they fit. It leaves kind of a limited range for the emotions the characters transmit through their sprites. There should have been more, like at least 4 or 5 sprites per character. Like some of them, like for instance, Akaru, uh, which I'm gonna be mentioning the characters later, but his sprites literally almost barely change. They barely change. They're almost entirely the same. Like the range is like the regular face, then the shaken up face is like the same face with just a little bit of sweat falling down his face, which is kind of like, um, okay, that's exactly the same thing with just a little bit of sweat. Like the character barely changes his face. But yeah, as for the full spreads, those full spread images, like I said before, they're completely different from the sprites. I mean, some of them are closer than others, but like the main character looks nothing like his spreads. Like he looks nothing like it. It's a completely different person. But yeah, the spreads are usually a lot higher quality than the sprites, though they're also kind of like not consistent. There's some pretty good spreads, yes. Like for instance, the one at the end of chapter 1 where they're all sitting down waiting for them to be released, or the one in chapter 3 when one of the characters is overlooking the entire city. Those are actually pretty high quality. But then there's some that are just kind of eh. Like for instance, I remember one very well, that is the one where one specific character is laying down on the bed and the character you're seeing the point of view of is looking at her. That spread in particular is not exactly that great. So yeah, so it can vary. Most of them are good, but not all of them. Some of them are not that great. For the environmental designs, they're okay, I'd say. They did a decent job making the designs. The main issue, though, with the environment itself is the fact that the design of the place we spend most of the game in, which is a tower with like 7 floors, or 8 if you count like the bottom floor they use for some storage and for the light panels. The environment itself is kind of not that interesting, I feel like, especially since you spend 50 hours inside of this tower, and most of the mystery is tied to movements of characters around this tower. I feel like they could have made a more interesting place. Like, obviously, in terms of geometry, it's pretty boring. It's just a square, like a regular building. It's just a square. But the floors themselves feel like they're kind of repetitive. I can basically explain the layout of the entire place, but overall you only have 2 floors that are kind of unique. The rest are just copy and pasted of each other. So you have the base floor, which is the floor where the exhibition is taking place. You have the exhibition floor, basically. This floor is the entrance where basically the people that visit this tower usually stay, the visitors. They go ahead and see the crystals that are on display. Basically, it's called the crystal floor because of it, because it's the place where the visitors go to see the crystal displays that this tower is specifically. It's kind of its purpose in the story. It's to basically show a certain type of crystals, make some exhibitions about crystals they find in the mountains. So yeah, the first floor you have the lobby where people enter and wait until they're allowed in. Then you have like 2 hallways connected at the end that are filled with rooms. These rooms being the rooms that showcase the numerous crystals this specific company slash family is showcasing. Then you also have like a storeroom that is a small room that is used for storage. You have the toilets, yes. You have the event room. The event room is kind of like a more special crystal room where the main event that is taking place at the beginning of the story. A special crystal is being showcased in there. And then through the lobby you can also access the lower floor, which is the one that I talked about, that is used for storing some random stuff, and as the light panels. Then the other unique floor is the one on the opposite end, the one at the top, that is basically a small living area that used to be the place where the family, that now doesn't really exist anymore, but they used to control that tower, used to live in. So you basically have a living room, you have basically a regular house, a kitchen, some bedrooms, etc. You also have an elevator connecting all the floors, by the way. And then every single floor in between these two, floor 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, are basically just copy-pasted with each other. They're basically just work floors. You basically have a layout that goes in a U. So you go from you go up a staircase, and then you go forward, then you go left, then you go backwards, and there's another staircase. Basically, it's a loop every floor, and each floor gives up to the next one. So you go forward, left, back, and you have the stairs to the next floor, and it repeats like that until the 6th floor. These floors, though, are extremely boring. Yes, they basically only really have one section. I mean, they also have the bathrooms, the toilets, every single floor has one, and also an elevator entrance. But mostly what they have is an area for office work. These office works have like 3 sections or 3 partitions, but that's it. You have basically 5 entire floors who only have offices with a bunch of computers, and there's nothing interesting in them in the slightest. So, I mean, you're going back and forth multiple times through the exact same environments. And even in the crystal rooms that I said before, that I said was kind of unique, yes, I do feel like they made too many crystal rooms. I feel like they did not need to make that many. Like they could cut the crystal rooms in half, and I feel like it'll be a lot easier to keep track of the exact location of each character. I mean, they do give you a map, but there's too many rooms. There's just too many rooms. I don't think there's any need for that, especially since they're also all copy-pasted from each other. I don't think there was any need for that, but floors 2 through 6 are just insanely boring. I mean, you would be fine if there was one floor like that, but like 5 floors? I mean, I would prefer, honestly, if they had less floors, like, let's say they have like 4 floors, and make every floor unique. It'd be more interesting overall for the experience. As for the environmental storytelling, it's okay. They do give some tips and lay some foundations through the environmental storytelling. Though I do feel like there were some missed opportunities and stuff that was, you know, set up that was never used. One example of this was, for example, going back to floor 2 through 6, the partitions, the office partitions. They're basically set up in a way that is extremely dystopian. Like, they have cameras set up in every single partition of the offices, recording every single person. And the people in the back are basically completely isolated from each other. So basically the offices at the front are looking at the hallway, then behind them is like a solid wall. It's not really a wall, but it's kind of like a solid wall, and there's a door, and you enter the second set of offices, who basically have like another wall behind them and a solid wall in front of them. So they're basically in a completely enclosed space, barely even able to breathe, because there's like a computer and a desk for every like inch of territory that you have in there. All the spaces is completely filled with offices, and then you go further back again, and there's another set of computer offices with barely any space to move about, everything filled with offices, basically just completely locked without any view to the outside, not even being able to look at the always nothing. You just locked in, and you have cameras recording your every move. Like, even the characters notice that this is dystopian as hell. Like, the windows, you have a very small window, you can barely even get your face in, like on the hole, and that's it. There's no contact with the outside. The characters do notice how weird this entire thing is, and I thought they were setting up something with the environment, but they never really go anywhere with it. So I mean, I'm kind of confused as to why they even decided to do that. This is a big issue. The story is, as you're going to be seeing throughout this review, that the authors or the writers definitely set up a lot of narratives and a lot of talking points that never end up being brought again. They never really end up going anywhere, which I feel like is kind of a shame, to be honest, to waste stuff that could be interesting like that. But yeah, moving back to the general design, another thing that is interesting and not a bad thing to add were the tips and the flowchart. Starting with the tips are basically a little button that appears on the corner of your screen that basically gives you some insight into certain parts of the dialogue. Certain parts of the dialogue are going to be prompting that, where the story gives you a little bit more context, if you wanted to. I mean, basically for people who haven't really figured it out yet, it will be a very useful tool to help players who are not really figuring that out just yet. And then the flowchart is very interesting because it basically keeps track of the location of a certain thing that I'm going to be talking about later that is essential to the plot, and that honestly keeping track of that by yourself would be excruciatingly difficult with how many times that thing is moved and used throughout the story. It's actually very nice to have that, keeping track of stuff. The main issue with these two things, they're good ideas overall. The main issue is that you only get them after you finish the game and basically get all the answers basically thrown in your face. The answers that you do not get told are completely unrelated to these two. These two things don't help those two answers at all, those mysteries that the game doesn't answer. But these things are completely useless by the end of the game. Like, unless you're basically planning on replaying the game and getting a higher level of understanding of everything, I guess, knowing exactly every detail about the story, which, again, we'll get to later. I don't think anyone is going to be doing that, since the plot is not exactly the most compelling thing ever. This would be very useful for someone starting off the game, like you finish a chapter, and then maybe not immediately, like as soon as you finish a chapter, these things unlock. And you can go ahead and go to the tips section without even having to replay the chapter. And see tips for specific parts of the story, I think would be interesting. You could also just choose not to. The game should warn you about that. If you don't want the tips, don't use them. But if you're kind of confused, go ahead and use the tips to guide you in the right direction. And the flowchart would also be very, very useful. You could even have an incomplete flowchart, I guess. You would only get the flowchart for all the confirmed locations of the thing. Just that would be enough to have it be very useful. But at the end of the game, what use does this thing even have when you already know everything about that is to know? Like, it's not going to give you any extra knowledge knowing using the flowchart in a replay even. I mean, it's not really going to give you anything. I mean, I guess you're going to have a higher understanding of what's going on, but the main mystery is not going to be changed in any meaningful way with this stuff. So it's basically useless giving you at the end of the game. Like, why did they not make it so that you get it earlier through the chapter? That is so dumb. Following this, we have another interesting, in quotation marks, aspect of the game, that is the fact that the game decides to test you. To test the knowledge and how much you actually know of what's going on. And overall, that's not exactly a bad idea, I think, to engage with the player like that. But honestly, the way this was implemented, I just don't think was the correct one. It ends up being extremely long and extremely boring. Like, the final chapter is basically a 5-hour long info dump in the form of a 100 questionnaire at the end. They basically dump you 96 questions about the entire story, and you have to basically answer based on what you know. The main issue, though, I mean, taking out the fact that this type of culmination is not exactly the most cathartic thing ever, I'm gonna be honest. We'll get into it in a little bit in the story section, but this is not exactly the most epic conclusion. It feels kind of like a wet fart of an ending, I'm not gonna lie. The main problem, though, is the way this questionnaire is implemented here. First of all, 96 questions, back to back to back to back, is just painful to get through. Let's be honest, like the pace crawls to a stop, especially because each explanation is just long-winded as hell. Some of them are incredibly long. And it's just, man, it's just not fun. Like, the pacing is dead by that point. It's just so slow, it feels like a chore to get through. It's not a fun way to reveal things. It's actually the worst way possible to reveal things, through like an info dump like this. And after the first 30 questions, you're going to be tired of answering it anyway. Furthermore, the second issue you have with this game, you have with this questionnaire, is the fact that by this point in the game, chapter 5, the final chapter, you're at the very least 40 hours into the game. So you're not gonna remember basically any of the details of the things that were going on in chapter 1, in chapter 2, in chapter 3 for two reasons. First of all, it was 40 hours ago. So a lot of the stuff that sometimes you don't even deem as important are important to the plot. Like most of the movements of every character are important, which is the thing. It's not a question of, well, you don't have a discerning eye for determining what's important and what's not. No, it's not about that. Every single movement of every single character is used in these questionnaires. And that's not something you're going to be keeping in mind. Like, a character came out of this room and went there. I mean, that happens so many times, you're not going to be keeping all of that in mind. I mean, it's impossible. I mean, you could use the notes, and certainly some things you could probably say that you should have noted down. I didn't, because honestly, I could not be bothered to note down. Some things you could, yes, but most of the half of the questions are not even related to, you know, the things that just scream important in your face. They're just regular character movements, and you have to note all of that down if you want to answer the questionnaire. And you're just not going to do that, and obviously not going to remember it. Like, there's a lot of tiny details that are supposed to be relevant, but again, a lot of these details, not only are they not in your head, first of all, you don't really even remember them, because then when you're reading them, they don't seem important. Because again, if you're basically arguing that you could take notes, you'd have to take notes about the entire story. That's how much it matters. Like, every single character movement, every movement in every chapter is used to the final questionnaire, and there's no way you're going to be doing that. You're not going to be taking notes of everything, because if everything is important, nothing is kind of the thing. Whenever you come into a mystery novel, it's kind of like in your brain to kind of decipher important information from like noise. Whereas in this game, you don't really have that distinction. Everything is important. There's no noise. All of it is relevant. And all of it is going to be questioned in the questionnaire. So at that point, there's no really any, you know, important knowledge selection, which I don't think is a good way of doing it. But even besides all of that, just the fact that it's 40 hours later from the point where you actually play the scenes, even if you know things down, you're going to be losing context. You're going to be losing specific words characters said. You're not going to be going ahead and transposing all dialogues. And again, if you don't, you're going to be missing some of the questions. So I don't think it was implemented very well. And honestly, it's virtually impossible for you to get all the questions right, precisely because of that. Not only are there 96 questions, so it's just hard from a quantitative standpoint, but even if you don't have a problem with that, just from the type of questions you're going to be asked, you're not going to be getting everything right. Which, I mean, it's fine if you don't get everything right. You don't really need to get everything right. But I can almost guarantee you, most players or most readers, once they get to the questionnaire, they're not even going to get half the questions right. They're not even going to get a third of the questions right. That's what I'll say. And I mean, maybe they'll get a third, but a lot of them are going to be guesswork. They're not going to be confident answers either, because you're just not going to remember, and you're not going to go back to reread it. I mean, it's a game, it's a visual novel that has at least 50 hours of content. You're not going to go back and reread the entire thing just to answer the questionnaire. There's no way you're doing that. Even with the go back in time function, there's no way you can be bothered to do that after 40 hours it took you to get to chapter 5. What I would suggest doing instead of doing a 96 question questionnaire at the end of the game, instead of having a math test like that, what should have been done, in my opinion, was doing like a little quiz after every chapter, to basically gather and organize the thoughts of the player at the end. This would basically make it so that the player will have the event still fresh on their mind, so they would be able to have more context into all of the questions. They would still remember most of the situations, because again, they don't have the information overload where they have like 4 chapters worth of information fighting for space in their brain, and they'd still have the stuff fresh in their mind. Another thing that they should do is actually warn the player that there's actually going to be a questionnaire at the end of every chapter, to make the player actually pay more attention rather than just, you know, making the questionnaire unannounced. And these questions would also maybe be used to kind of guide the player into an interesting direction, like maybe some stuff that the player might have missed and or thought not important. If it appears on a questionnaire, they might not even without even giving you the answer. Unlike the final questionnaire, which gives you the right answer, these questionnaires would not give you the answer. It's just to gather the thoughts of the player, but just nudging them in that direction, like, I don't know, this stuff over here, it's actually important. What do you think about it? There might be something that the player hasn't really considered or didn't really think about, because they're either focused on bigger issues or bigger mysteries, or stuff that is just more on your face and they just forget some tinier stuff. Yes, you can still keep stuff hidden. Doesn't need to be everything, but some stuff, like some movements that are more relevant than others, you can just go ahead and nudge, oh, this is actually an important movement over here, more important than your average movement, so you should probably pay attention. It's also better to kind of just nudge the player in, so that you don't need to do all their work. Again, I'm not saying just go ahead and, you know, select everything that is important, all the hidden clues. No, not like that, but just some level of nudging. You don't really need to push the player into it. Just make them aware that maybe there's something there to be explored. You don't need to get, again, you're not giving any answers here. You're not giving any answers, just asking and collecting the answers of the player. And you don't need to go ahead and just shove everything, every single hidden detail. Because yes, I also do like that people that pay a lot of attention get rewarded at the end. But just some of the more important movements, some of the major ones, so that the player has the major ones still fresh in their mind, whereas the people who are more attentive can go deeper into it, and take note of more important stuff that can be used then at the ending for them. I think it's a better balance overall than just basically making the player just have to mentally record everything in their mind overall. And then we could still have like a final questionnaire, and this time we could have some answers. Though again, I still am not exactly the biggest fan of a questionnaire as the final chapter. It's just not cathartic, man. Again, it just feels like a wet fart of a conclusion. You're just going around that, actually, it's time to actually review what happened. It doesn't feel like a conclusion. I mean, I don't know, man, it feels weird. There's a conclusion, but the conclusion feels more like an afterthought. It doesn't feel like the climax of the story. So, yeah. Obviously not 96, not 96, not 96 questions long. That's ridiculous. Definitely less. I mean, I definitely think you could have like 30 questions at most. Plus, you would also redo maybe the questions or the questionnaire that you had the player do at the end of each chapter, just to see if they actually still agree with what they chose in chapter 1. This would basically give the player a sense of progression. Like, I believed this when I didn't have as much information, but now that I know more, I actually think it's different, or I actually still think the same. It's the same thing. I actually got it right the first time, and you can see the progression and then the correct answer. I think that would be an interesting way of doing it, more interesting than what we got overall. But yeah, this comparison would actually be interesting for the player. Overall, actually, before that, there's another thing that I wanted to mention, that is the fact that visual novels are usually known as a medium where you don't really have a lot of interaction. You're to the next part of the text. This is a video game with as interactive book. There's more interaction than books, I guess. You do click more often on the buttons than you would be changing pages, but I digress. One thing that visual novels usually do, though, to make up for that is, and to basically take advantage of the medium that you can also do it in books, but it's not as intuitive. It doesn't function as well, I feel like, is the select your own ending, your own path type of thing. Not all of them do it. Yes, there's some that focus on other types of interactivity, but this one doesn't have other types of interactivity. So, I mean, I guess the questionnaire counts, but that's a terrible one. That is a terrible type of interactivity. But yeah, it's the path choice, the choices that lead down to different paths, and to bad endings as well. I feel like this story does not have enough. I feel like, if I remember correctly, there's like one choice that leads down a different path or ending per chapter, excluding chapter 5. Chapter 5 does not have any of those. So there's one of them in each and every one of them, and they don't even feel like different paths. They feel like complete afterthoughts. Now, granted, not all bad endings need to be very thoroughly explored. That's true. But they really don't even feel like a path. They feel like the authors just took advantage of a side path or bad ending to just juxtapose more information about the mystery, rather than, an interesting side content or an interesting deviation from the story. They don't really use that to tell any more story. They just use it once again to build more upon the mystery and the way it works, which I feel like, I mean, I don't know, they just kind of feel completely forgettable because of it. Not to mention the fact that there's barely any of them. Again, there's 4 in the whole game. 1 in each chapter. I feel like there should have been more for a game with 50 hours. Bad endings. And more paths that did not just involve building up more of the mystery, that actually follow down a different path of the story. Absolutely should have been the case, man. There's just kind of, I don't know, man, it just did not feel like enough, personally. 50 hours, a game of 50 hours, there should have been more choices, dude. For sure. I mean, I've seen visual novels with half the length, with the exact same amount of paths, and actual fleshed out paths, by the way. It's not just, a 5-minute rundown that is only really used to showcase more of the mysteries or the powers at play. Actually, an in-depth story that you can actually go and follow. In this one, I mean, they not only feel weak, they feel like they did not give us enough. So yeah, that's another negative. And that's about it for the general non-spoiler review. Now we're gonna start getting into the main part of the review. That is gonna contain spoilers, so I probably already let a little bit of the story escape, nothing major, overall. I don't think I got any big spoilers. I said any big spoilers so far. But from this point onwards, there's gonna be spoilers. So if you do not want to be spoiled, I guess you should leave the video right now. I'll give you 5 seconds to do so. But yeah, if you didn't leave yet, well, you're on your own now. There's gonna be spoilers. So, as I said already quite a few times, the story takes like 40 to 50 hours to complete. I mean, 40 hours you're gonna be have to rushing. Though, I have 59 hours, but the way I played, I basically left the game on the background for a while. So there's a lot of dead time in there where I was just doing something else, and the game was just running in the computer, and I wasn't really advancing. So maybe, but overall I don't think that's more than 9 hours. So I'd say 50 hours is about right. That's also the time that says, the time that is said on basically every online forum about the game. It's about 50 hours. 40 hours, I mean, you'd have to rush through everything, and you're gonna get 0 questions correct in the questionnaire, by the way. You're gonna get that. I mean, if you know, but there's one way you could actually do it well and get within 40 hours, and that is if you manage to decipher which of the dialogues is useless and just skip it entirely, and you will be able to cut at least 5 hours, maybe even more, maybe 10 hours, if you actually knew that. Obviously, in a mystery novel, you're not going to be thinking that you can just skip 10 hours of dialogue and be fine. But you actually could in this one, and we're going to be getting into that later. But obviously nobody that has not read the story yet is going to be thinking like that. So you're going to be spending at least 50 hours. Or you're going to be spending 40 hours and you're not going to be able to understand anything at the end. I guess it is it is one or the other. 50 hours though, as you can probably tell, is an insanely long time. Like, I don't even know what the last game I invested 50 hours in was. I mean, for visual novel standards, that's like on the upper echelon of time spent. And there's some that are bigger, like there's some that you have to spend double that, 100 hours. They're rare. Most of them usually are in the 10 to 20 hour range. 50 hours is a lot. It's really long. And outside of visual novels in general, it's a very heavy amount of time to sink in, like 50 hours of watching movies, watching TV series, playing games, watching an anime. Like, that's a lot of time that you have to invest. It's not nothing. As I said, I basically did it all in 4 days, but I basically did nothing else besides it. Yeah, I know, I'm a bum. But if you're investing in sinking 50 hours into the story, I mean, the story has to be damn well good to warrant that. But well, as I said also before, probably, I mentioned it kind of in a backhand comment, there's not really a lot of replayability, because the story itself doesn't warrant that. The story is not interesting enough for you to go back and reread it. And the 96 questionnaire at the end of the story basically makes it so that you don't even need to go back to do anything, because you have everything done. Again, there's a few mysteries that you don't really have it done, but replaying the game is not really gonna help you with those. I mean, they don't give you the answer, they don't give you anything really to solve that. I guess, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they did release some statement really telling us about those answers, but those mysteries are not going to be solved with a replay. So a replay doesn't do anything. The only thing you get with a replay is the tips and the flowchart, which once again is useless because you already know everything that is going on. So you're not going to gain any information. There's not going to be any new context, any change in the way you see the story. No. So there's no replayability. You're not going to read this again after you read it once. There's no way you do that. As for general plot, I guess I can give a brief overview of what the plot is about. We start off the story inside of this tower that I just mentioned, in the lobby, following, I would say, probably the main character. I guess there's 2 main characters. They're both right at the beginning. The first one you follow is called Atsuki. That is exactly the one that the sprites look nothing like his full spread design. But yeah, you follow him. Now right next to him is his childhood friend, like Shioriya, and they're both at the lobby, waiting for the doors to open for them to participate in a special event. The owners of this tower, they're called the Ashia family, have supposedly found a new special gemstone, and they're going to show it to the world. It was a never seen before gemstone. And the reason these two main characters are in here, even though they don't really care about the gemstone and don't really like the Ashia family because they have a bad reputation, the reason they're here is because of something that happened before the events of the game. That is, you kind of can already tell from the beginning the way they talk. One of their best friends died a few weeks before, and they had actually promised to go to the exhibition together, and they spent a few weeks depressed, and in those weeks right before the exhibition they decided to, you know what, we should go do this together, overcome her death. That's what she would have wanted as well. Let's make use of this anyway to start breaking out of our depression and move forward with our lives. So that's why they're here. Eventually they're called in, they enter the event room led by one of the workers there, and as that worker is about to pull the veil to showcase the stones, smoke starts spreading through the building. This smoke, we assume, has some sort of property that makes people pass out, because a few seconds after the smoke appears and the main characters inhale that smoke, they all fall down on the ground and get knocked out. I mean, the main character, Atsuki in this case, hears a siren start to blare. He also hears a massive sound coming from the lobby, and then he passes out. And that's basically our beginning. The two main characters then wake up. We don't really know exactly how long afterwards, a few minutes afterwards, and they start looking at the building, and eventually find more people. One of the people disappeared. The attendant that brought them into the event room disappeared. She was not there anymore. There was another person in the room with them. It was basically a group of three that entered to see the exhibition. The three people were there, both Atsuki, Shiroya, and the third person. The attendant that was in charge of showing them the stone was not there anymore. They go around the building, and as they leave, they basically find another group of people. They were the second group that was supposed to go to the event room to see the stone. They were told to wait basically outside in the hallways, so they also got caught up in the smoke. There's a group of three people, one guy, a woman and a child, and there's also another guy that was not really a customer, but was the security guard that was inside of the security room, also in there. And we basically get told they're the only people left inside of the building. Everyone else evacuated, and as they ask why they can't evacuate as well, the security guard basically tells them that all of the entrances have been shut down, and they're gonna have to wait 12 hours until they open again. And that the reason for this is not really explained until later. It doesn't really impact the baseline, but long story short, they're stuck inside of the tower for 12 hours and they cannot leave. All the windows have been shut, the entrance has been shut, they can't leave, there's no other exits, so they cannot leave the tower for 12 hours. The reason for this to happen is kind of convoluted, yes. I mean, it's not really exactly realistic that something like this would happen, but I can suspend my disbelief enough to accept this setting. So that's basically the basic gist of this. That's basically what happens within the first half an hour of the story. Now we can go ahead and talk about the characters. There's basically 8 central characters in the story. I already talked about 2 of them. Atsuki, which is the guy that we follow through the first chapter, and Shiroya, which is his childhood friend, which we actually get to see the perspective of throughout all of Chapter 3. They're basically the main characters. As for the others, we have Akar, which I already mentioned him as well before, but he is the guy that was also alongside the two main characters in the event room. He was the third person that I mentioned that was still there when they woke up. We have Kate, which is the security room guy. We have Sai, which was the guy that I mentioned from the second group. Erina, that is the mother, and Isla, that is the child, both of them from the second group as well. And then we have Naomi, which is the one person that was showcasing the stone in the event room, and that I said that had disappeared after the main characters woke up. And if you basically read any review about this game, this is the one point that basically even the biggest fans of the story will go ahead and admit the characters are not exactly great. The mystery overall revolves around the mysterious powers that are going on inside of the tower, and the characters are basically just used as chess pieces to allow for the mystery to take place. In long story short, they don't really feel like people. They just act the way they need to act for the mystery to take place exactly the same way the authors or the writers envision it, basically. Their actions don't really have to be unfounded, they don't really have to make sense. Not only logical, but with their character, they don't need to be consistent, they don't need to have any motivation for anything, they don't nothing of the sort. They just act specifically so that the mystery can take place exactly as the authors wanted to, which, I mean, that's not really good character writing, is it? They're barely even any character. They're barely any characters. They're barely characters, is what I was trying to say. They just feel like pieces of the puzzle pieces on a puzzle. They don't really feel like characters. They feel like blank slates, really. I mean, you could just replace all the characters with blank slates, and you basically get the exact same thing. Out of all the characters overall, going in more in depth about all of them, there's like 4 main issues I can count on top of my head with the way the characters are written. First, we have the fact that these characters do not react to things happening around them like normal people should. Those 8 people have been involved in a large-scale attack. I mentioned the smoke, like there were full hallways filled with smoke, and whoever it was knocked out basically everyone that smelled it. And they stayed knocked out for who knows how long. I mean, this is an extremely serious situation where everyone will be kind of unnerved and kind of scared. And yet, they don't really seem to care. I mean, the shock of what happened to them seems to wear off instantly. And they immediately start acting like detectives for some reason. They start trying to understand what's going on. This is not how regular people act, man. I mean, regular people will be staying still next to the shutters in the entrance, waiting for the police to come in. They would not be going around surveying the entire building, trying to find the possible perpetrator, someone who basically have access to, you know, explosives that release, you know, sleeping smoke, and that's basically apparently just committed a robbery of one of the most valuable gemstones in that tower. That's not how regular people act. They would not be going after someone dangerous like that. They would be waiting for the police to show up. They don't even have any weapons to protect themselves. They're just going around looking for a dangerous criminal. That's not normal behavior. And things get even worse when they learn about the special superpowers of the stone that was being displayed on that event, which we'll get to those superpowers later. But long story short, that thing has superpowers, and well, regular people would probably not get involved with that thing. Because first of all, they don't know how it works. They don't know if there's any possible chance of danger. Maybe some people that are more greedy than others would try to make use of it, but most people would not. They would stay away from that, from something that they do not even understand. They don't know the consequences of what they're trying to do. And yet, literally every single character ends up going after it in one way or the other without even caring about the possible consequences. They just go around trying to get it over and over again. I don't think that's very natural for people to act that way. They instantly start, all of them, regular civilians, all start trying to steal that for their own ends. Yeah, again, as I said, you'll be fine to have like one psycho in the group who doesn't care about danger, who is extremely greedy. But everyone acting like that just doesn't smell right, does it? It just doesn't feel normal or realistic. That's just, I don't know, weak writing to force the characters into positions that the writers want them in. I mean, if the characters had too much of a reticence to use those powers or to go after the killer, they could not really build a mystery now, could they? So again, this is an example of the characters acting in ways that are not normal. They don't feel like people. This is made even worse when the supposed person that committed this attempted robbery starts somehow killing people, and the main cast starts seeing the bodies of people falling down and appearing dead in certain places. So now you're not just inside the tower with a potential robber that has access to smoke that knocks you out. You're inside the tower with a murderer that already killed 2 people. Which the same person, by the way, they killed the same person, which is kind of funny. But yeah, this is also another thing that should have made them even more scared to use the superpower of the stone, considering that they just saw the same person die twice. But yeah, they're inside the tower with someone who just not only committed this incredibly complex attempted robbery, they murdered someone twice. Again, without anything to defend themselves, without even knowing where they are. They go on their own, after sounds, looking at individual rooms where the guy could just be hiding himself by themselves without any thought about their own safety. They don't really get unnerved, they don't really get scared, they don't really get tense, they don't really start doubting the people around them. I mean, whenever someone dies, we have like a discussion about who could have killed them, but that discussion never really feels like confrontational overall. It's kind of like a thought exercise, a theoretical exercise. Oh, it could only have been you were there. No, it could only have been you, I was actually up there. It's never actually trying to find out who exactly killed them. Like, where is the urgency here? Someone here just killed one of the people in the tower. Where is the urgency of trying to find the murderer? Why are we acting like this? Like nothing happened, like we're just doing a regular thought exercise, man. Like, the normal reaction to this would be everyone dogpiling on someone, grabbing him, knocking him out, and stuffing him into a room, if they thought that person was the main possible culprit for the kill. But no, nobody ever tries to go hard like this. Like 5 minutes later, after they find the dead body, some random noise happens, and they instantly forget that they're with the murderer inside the tower. They just stop even caring about it. I mean, I don't know, man. The way these characters act and react to stuff just does not feel human, man. I don't know what to say. It doesn't feel human. Like, they don't even care about the person that was killed. I mean, we do see some thoughts of the main character. I feel bad for it, but everyone else seems to just brush off completely the dead boy they found. They don't care. Again, they don't get scared for themselves. They don't even feel bad for the person that was killed. They don't even attempt to try and find and try genuinely, find out which one of them killed them, or if it was someone else. And if it was someone else that is hiding inside that tower, they don't even try to put themselves in a safe place and wait out the 12 hours. No, they just go on alone to multiple places in the tower where someone who is probably armed even though the killer is never really armed. I mean, he is armed like once. Could probably just jump them, dump their body in a hidden place and run away. Like, they don't care. Don't care about their own safety. The second issue that I have with these characters has to do with the character dialogue. And, well, this one is one type of probably the worst offender in my opinion, since it's actually detrimental to you enjoying the story. The other one, you kind of only really realize it once you're taken out of the story and kind of reflect a little bit on it. This one, it actually starts reducing your enjoyment within the story itself. I mean, the dialogue is actually okay at the beginning. It feels realistic. Characters talking about their things, their past. They're kind of shaken that they're gonna be locked in here. They're pissed off that they're locked in here. Why the hell are they locked inside the tower for 12 hours? Why are they inside the tower with a possible criminal? But that just disappears in like within the first hour. Especially once they start finding out about the powers of the stone that was in the exhibition. Not only do they start, as I said before, they decide to start playing around with the stone with no thoughts of the potential dangers that come from using it without even knowing how it works. But also, from that moment onwards, any semblance of normality in the character dialogue is just gone, disappears. They stop talking like people completely and just completely enter their role of pieces of the puzzle. They're just there to act out whatever the authors or the writers wanted for the mystery. From that moment onwards, which is basically, again, as I said, 1 hour, about 1/5 of the way through the first chapter, any normal dialogue you might have seen basically disappears. Every single conversation starts being focused completely on the powers of the stone. Every single conversation you hear is about them discussing how the stone worked, making theories and debating each other about how the stone works. I actually went to the past and showed up there, and actually I went to the past and showed up there. And then they start discussing who could have possibly used the elevator, who could have made that sound if everyone was here, starting accusing each other of lying, that they did not, do the search correctly and whatever. There's not a single more normal human conversation anymore. Even when the characters are alone in their bedrooms, they eventually go to the bedroom, they just stay there. Like the main character with Shiorya, they don't talk about anything other than the power of the stones. There's no other conversation topic ever again in this story. It's not just the dialogue itself. Because if it was just the dialogue, okay. The issue is, though, is that as you're following the main character, Atsuki in this case, very likely half, of the stuff you're reading are the inner thoughts of Atsuki, and all those inner thoughts are about him going about theorizing about the power of the stone. And he basically repeats the same arguments over and 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 over again all throughout the story. Which is funny as well, because he's basically wrong about all his theories. He repeats them so much throughout chapter 1. We don't get any information or insights from what Atsuki is thinking in chapter 1. And yet, I would say a third of that chapter is his inner thoughts theorizing about the power of the stone. Which I end up being completely wrong, by the way. So, you have basically almost all the dialogue being about the stone. You have basically all of Atsuki's, or the main character we follow in the first chapter, all his thoughts being about the stone, all discussions being about the stone. Like, it gets very tiring very fast. Not to mention that the pace is terrible Like nothing happens for long stretches of time because it's just Atsuki thinking about the powers of the stone instead of doing anything with it. And yeah, I mean, he uses the power of the stone several times, and again, he doesn't gain any insights. We don't gain any insights. He reaches the same conclusion as before. I mean, I guess you could gain insights if you were taking very precise notes, but overall, we don't really get anything. So, I mean, the pacing is just horrible because of it. Another thing that you notice is that everyone seems to become a master at lying. I already said that basically everyone decides that they want the stone now, even though none of them know exactly how the stone works. And none of them really, not all of them really should have been like greedy like that, but all of a sudden everyone wants the stone. And not really for, good reasons, I guess. They all have somewhat of a reason to want the stone. Like, but I'm gonna get to the motivations later. One thing that I'll say though is that everyone just becomes a master liar and manipulator. Everyone starts gaslighting everyone. Everyone starts lying to everyone. Everyone starts keeping secrets to everyone. Everyone just a master liar. Everyone just knows how to lie perfectly. I mean, most of them are regular people. They just learn how to lie perfectly. I mean, Kate is like a master liar. Sai, I guess that's part of his character, but he's just a master liar. Akaru, master liar. Erina, just a regular person, perfect liar. Shiroya, perfect at lying as well. Atsuki as well, perfect at lying. All of them just become incredible actors, all perfect at lying. Just lie to each other. And not only that, but they rarely even create contradictions. It's funny because Kate gets run over through the entirety of chapter 1 for the contradictions in his own words, though those contradictions are actually not even his. He was through stuff out. Nobody actually, no talking like that expression, the way they talk, the logic behind the perfect narrative. All of a sudden, on the fly as well. And it's not as if they all created like this perfect plan. No, on the fly, they just lie perfectly with no logical contradictions. Like, it's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. The dialogues, I mean, they're just repetitive overall as well. Like, as I said, it's about discussions about the stone. Not just about the powers, but also about how someone found the stone, and how someone hid it again, and how it was found somewhere else again. And this just repeats over and over and over again. Like, someone finds the stone, hides it, someone else finds the stone, hides it. They discuss, you actually were lying. You was actually here when you said you weren't. And now I'm not lying. Someone put it that afterwards. It just repeats over and over again. You hear the same dialogue repurposed for the different scenarios so many times. It's crazy. Get into the character backgrounds that I was talking about before. This is the third main issue that I have with the character writing. Overall, out of the 8 characters, I guess 9 technically, but we'll get to the 9th one later. We only have 2 characters with very defined backgrounds. We know more or less what kind of people they were. We actually have backstories for them. We actually have a traumatic experience for both of them, and that traumatic experience may have been a valid reason for what they were trying to do in the story. But overall, they're the only ones we get out of it. I mean, I'll get to them later as well, but I feel like with the stuff they set up with them, they did not use it very well, but we'll get to that later. Everyone else, though, the other 6 characters range from the most basic outlook for a character, and that outlook was basically, once again, not even, I mean, I feel like the way they wrote these characters wasn't really creating a character that they thought was interesting and placing them into the story from him. So basically nothing, really. You don't really get any any insight as to anything related to his character. And the same with the other 3. Again, at the very least he has a role to play. I mean, I can't really say the same for the other 4, who basically don't even have a role defined for themselves. Sai is there, and he wants to take the stone because he's also greedy. But the thing is, he doesn't even have a role defined like Kate does, involved in this whole, war going on between the Jin that wants to steal the stone, Ashia family wants to keep it, and Kate who is in the middle acting as a double agent. Not even a double agent, he's acting as an agent for himself, taking advantage of the chaos. Sai doesn't have any of that, he's also greedy. Then Erin and Isla don't really want the stone. I mean, Erin wants it at one point in time, but her motivation is decent then. But she doesn't have anything going for her, really. I mean, there's nothing really there for either of them. They're just there. And then, I mean, Naomi's not even a character. I mean, calling it a character is a stretch, since she has like a grand total of 5 minutes of screen time. 4 of those minutes being at the beginning before anything starts. So, yeah, those are the characters we have. Like, they're moving about without much of a reason. We don't really have any background on them. We just have what we get from there. The basic outline is what you get from them. You don't get anything else. Now, again, it doesn't mean that every character needs to have a very in-depth backstory and a very in-depth reason for why they do things. Yes, it could just be regular human behavior, sure. I would accept one of the characters being greedy, but not like basically 2 of them just being straight up greedy. Like the way Sai was acting, for instance. If you already have Kate as the greedy guy, we can't just go ahead and reuse the same motivation for Sai as well. He's also just greedy. Like, come on, man, that's pretty fucking... That's pretty damn boring as a motivation. Give us something else to work with, and not just motivation, just as the character overall. We don't know anything about these characters. Like, we don't know anything about Kate, about Sai, about Erin, about Isla. Naomi, I'm not even going to talk about. She basically doesn't appear in the entire game. She literally only is there to die for the mystery. That's all she serves. She does nothing else. But overall, having basically 6 characters have no background, no exploration of their characters, besides the main 2 characters, even they did not really get explored as much as they should have. Particularly Atsuki. I'd say Shirei they had attempted to explore the character a little bit. They didn't really go far enough, interestingly enough. But Atsuki was not very explored in the slightest. And the 9th character was not explored that much either. I'm gonna talk about that character later. But yeah, overall, we don't really know what kind of people these people are that we're following. And that's precisely, again, this was done on purpose, because like that, if you don't know who they are and what they're about, they can just justify any sort of action from them without having to justify anything, since we don't know what type of people they are. That's just the laziest way of doing things. Following character motivation. While most characters do have a logical explanation for the way they act, it doesn't really feel like the story does a good job of making their actions believable either. Like, as I said before, Sai being so intent on getting the stone doesn't really make much sense. You chalking it up to greed, okay, is fine, but it doesn't work as well with Kate, because again, Sai is not a party involved in this old game that was laid before even this took place. Like this event that took place between Kate, the Ashia family, and Shin, of trying to get the stone from themselves. Sai was not involved in that. And the thing is, yes, he could have been the one trying to take advantage of the chaos. That's already Kate. He's the one who's tried to take advantage of the chaos. You can also get another one, but again, you're also replacing Kate's place already, first of all. And second of all, it doesn't work as well because Sai is literally the one pushing for the most things in it. He's not like in the background trying to take advantage of things, while Akaro and Kate fight each other, and the main characters as well, fight each other to try and get the stone. No, he's actually the one manipulating things the most to get the stone. Like he's the one who wants it the most, it seems. So it doesn't really feel right if you don't give me a real motivation for it. Just greed doesn't work. And there's also the fact that Sai is constantly flip-flopping in this position. Again, with him basically everyone just lying out, right? All of the story with zero sincerity. I mean, you can just chalk up every single one of the things he says as a lie and just leave it there. He was lying when he was saying that he actually didn't want it anymore. So he actually always wanted it. He was actually lying. He had a plan to take it back with him. But again, how would he take it back with him? I mean, he was literally at the door in chapter 1, waiting for the door to be opened. And yet he still had plans to hide the stone somewhere, to use it eventually and live with it. Even though he basically was at the door waiting for him to get for himself to get released. He knew that after the door opened, there was no way he was going to get the stone, and yet he was still doing things that were not going to get him anywhere. So why was he doing that? Why was he still going around moving the stone for some reason? Again, that stone would not go anywhere with him. He was never going to have that. Again, he's doing that because the story requires that to be done, not because there's any logic behind his actions, there's any motivation behind his actions. It just doesn't. We don't really know. You don't even know what you wanted to do with the stone regardless, even if you wanted to take it. We don't know why you wanted it. I mean, again, it could be simple greed or it could be something else, but we don't get explored either way. We don't know what he wanted to do with the stone and why he wanted it so bad. Greed, lust for power, I mean, yeah, that's all good and dandy. You need to actually tell us. You can't just leave it open why he wants the stone like this. Especially with someone like Sai who wants it so much. He's the one who wants it the most of the story. Even though he then acts coy, acts like he doesn't want it anymore and wants it locked. Usually that's just a lie to make everyone think that the stone is safe. While he himself is hiding it somewhere else. And then there's also the fact that people, several people, just seem to commit murder extremely easily. I can just go ahead and tell you that if you think there's going to be like one major villain in here, like one person responsible for all the murders is the murderer inside, that the point of the story is actually to find who the murderer is, I mean, guess again, you're wrong. Because the murderer actually changes multiple times. There's actually not just one murderer, there's multiple of them. Which again makes it all less interesting, first of all, because finding out the murderer is not really anything great because there's multiple of them, so it takes away the spectacle of finding the murderer, finally cornering him. And second of all, it also doesn't make as much sense from a character writing perspective, because once again, you need to make like half of the cast psychopaths. More than half of the cast psychopaths. And again, as I already said, it's fine for it to be one psycho in the group who doesn't care about killing people. More than half of the cast doesn't work, unless you explicitly tell us at the beginning that all these people are psychopaths. Actually, they all would commit murder at the drop of a finger. And yeah, I mean, Akaru commits murder, though one of his murders is more or less justified. He was kind of like doused. He wasn't even aware of what the fuck was going on. He's kind of confused. I guess I could see him just, what the hell is going on, just killing her, not even realizing he's doing it. But without even having the intent really to kill her. But the other time he kills people, Akaru, he's actually fully aware of his actions, which literally contradicts his character later when he says that he was actually traumatized by the fact that by mistake and without even doing it directly, Akaru caused the death of Atsuki's and Shiroya's friend. He was basically kind of the catalyst that led to that friend's death, and he was actually devastated for it. And yet 2 weeks later, it is the same Akaru somehow decides that, you know what, I'm just gonna kill 2 more people, 2 completely innocent people, not even indirectly, just directly murders 2 people. Wow, very consistent, very consistent. Then he goes on and on about how he actually had a friend that died as well, and he felt like it was his fault. I mean, this is not really like him trying to manipulate people. It is not trying to manipulate Atsuki and Shiroya. I'll talk about that later. Into actually liking him after killing Shiroya. I know how that sounds, but you'll understand later. That's not really him trying to manipulate them. I mean, that's an attempt to make the character more I mean, I just don't think it's well implemented, though. I mean, he murdered those two girls in cold blood, then again, like Sai just flip-flops in his morality. He murders two girls in cold blood. Then afterwards, talking about how he actually felt really bad when his friend died. He felt like it was his own fault. Then at the end of the story, after he leaves the tower, he just feels like actually I'm gonna go ahead and repent for what I've done. Like there's no real arc here. Like he just goes from murdering two people in 1 minute to an hour later wanting to repent for what he did, and we don't even see any progression of his character. Like no, man, that's not how this works. And especially since he was already set up in the backstory as someone who was terrified of killing other people because of his own past experience. Like, it just doesn't make any sense why he would just flip-flop like that in his stance for death. I mean, even if he was gonna get arrested, I mean, I feel like the way you characterize him just doesn't work. Especially because you don't see the inner struggle either of the character, of actually having to do this, him shaking afterwards and thinking, why did I do this or whatever. We don't see any of that from him. So it's just an inconsistent flip-floppy position from the character that just, again, changes as the authors want it. It's not consistent. So again, that's weak writing. And again, Kate just murders Naomi in cold blood, the first person he's ever killed, doesn't even show any remorse. Like Kate is like the biggest scumbag in the entire story, I guess. I mean, he lies and lies and lies. There's not a single truth that comes out of his mouth. He just murders Naomi out of nowhere without any remorse, doesn't care. And again, we were never told specifically that Kate was a psychopath, a liar maybe, not a psychopath. And yet he just acts like a complete psycho. He's also just not even shaking at all after killing the first person ever in his life. Yeah, again, that's not how someone reacts to killing someone for the first time. They don't just act like nothing happened. That doesn't work like. Not only does he act like nothing happened, he still tries to go ahead and argue that it was not even him. Again, complete psychopath behavior. I mean, maybe after he had like a night to stew on it and get his thoughts together, maybe, but like 5 minutes after killing her, and he didn't even want to kill her originally. He was not premeditated. He just snapped after Naomi was not following with his plan and just killed her. You don't just snap back into, logic mode right afterwards. That's not how it works. Then yeah, Erina just killed Kata. I mean, reasoning was, I guess, justifiable. But again, I don't think that's really committing murder like that. I don't really think that's something normal people easily get up to. Then we have the specific ninth character, which I'm going to talk about later, who somehow, because someone else is calling her a murderer and calling her responsible, even though she knows she did not do it. She knows she did not. She knows there's cameras as well. She knows she was not responsible for the kill that she's being accused of. Just the mere annoyance of hearing that person's voice is enough to just push her off the stairs and kill her. Not only that, to instantly, again, this is what gets me, these are regular people, they are not detectives. As soon as she kills someone for the first time, again, another psycho, she shows no remorse and instantly has a plan ready for escaping. Just instantly. I mean, come on, man. These people are not detectives. If you want to go ahead and make a story about detectives or super intelligent humans, make it from the beginning, not regular people. She killed someone for the first time ever in her life because she annoyed her. Pushed her off the stairs and killed her. That's not a regular reaction. Though, granted, this character was always introduced as a little bit of a psycho, so I guess I can give that a pass, but I mean, if you give a pass to this, I mean, you can't give it to the others, since all of the others are just psychos as well. She just has the whole plan ready for it. She was just a regular girl before that. No, she's not even shocked that she just killed someone. She's not petrified, stuck in place. What have I done? What have I done? No. Instantly has a plan to escape, and a perfect one at that. Because she basically manages to avoid being suspected. And then there's also Sai, who basically just decides that it's okay for him to run after both Atsuki and Shiori with a knife throughout the throughout the entire building and tried to kill them. Only stops because he realized the cameras are there to record them. And you can say that Sai had a valid reason for it. Maybe he had a valid reason. I still don't really believe that reason was even physically feasible. Like, how was Sai gonna get killed from a punch? Like, get real, man. Get real. He was never gonna get killed from that. But apparently, characters can just pull out strength feats that are far beyond anything, which I'll talk about right after Sai's case. But yeah, he just runs after Atsuki and Shiorya, and in the bad endings, in one of the bad endings, he actually just murders both and doesn't care. And you can say, yeah, he had a logical reason, yes, but deep down, when you actually listen to his thoughts, or what the narrator tells about his thoughts, the reason was not actually that. That was just the excuse to prompt him to act like that. That was not the real reason he cared about that. The real reason he was trying to kill them was actually to experience the first death, the first kill, killing the first person in his life. The narrator tells us that's actually the real reason Sai was after them. Not because of the logical reason of before. No, he just wanted to kill them, to experience what killing. It feels like, once again, a psychopath. And they thought he could get away with it. And then, yeah, also that ninth person, by the way, in one of the bad endings, for some reason, by the way, this ninth person is a very small woman. Mind you, she's a small woman. And with one screwdriver, she basically, in one of the bad endings, for no particular reason, we don't even know what the reason is. It's never told to us. She just snaps out of nowhere. Again, she was a regular civilian before. And just kills everyone in the tower. Yeah, murders everyone. Yeah, not only is, again, not physically logical, again, these characters seem to get superhuman strength to just kill everyone with a screwdriver. Like, you have someone like, Akaru, who is pretty physically intimidating. He's a very experienced robber, and somehow he cannot do anything about a, like, 5'6", 50-kilogram woman. Come on, man, really? But yeah, she just kills everyone. And then there's also Naomi, who also, after waking up and seeing that this ninth character killed everyone in the tower, she doesn't hide herself trying to escape this psychopath that just killed everyone. She doesn't try to run or yell for help. No. What does she do? She somehow catches this super-powered ninth person and kills her back. Like, it's unbelievable, man. These people just... I mean, I don't get it. The way these people just murder random people like this, while on camera as well. Like, this is just idiotic, man. Like, it's so dumb. Again, these characters will murder on command if the plot demands it. It doesn't matter if they're regular people. It doesn't matter if they've never killed anyone. They're gonna murder and they're gonna escape perfectly right afterwards because the plot demands it. And again, that's weak writing for the characters. And the fourth and final problem, I mean, this is the most minor one for me. It's also kind of like that cop-out thing that always talk about character development. I don't think a story needs to have character development to be good. And they're still great. They don't need to have development. They need to, at the very least, have something to them, right? At the very least, some development to make up for all of this, right? I mean, especially since there's 8 characters, at the very least one of them could have had some development, but I mean, the developments we get are not only unbelievable and feel kind of weird, like, again, the end in the development after Isla dies. It's logical, but I don't know, man. It's kind of flip-flops as well, because, man, she kind of becomes a bit crazy and kills Kate, as I said, but the rest of her behavior doesn't seem to indicate that craziness. It's that type of thing where they want to have their cake and eat it too. Like, they don't really actually portray Erin as completely crazy, but they also have her be crazy in a specific moment, in a very specific moment, to result in a death. So, yeah, but overall, besides that development, there's only 2 characters that have character development. One being Akaru. I already talked about his development before. I'm not going to repeat myself. since this review is already getting very long and I don't want to waste more time. But yeah, his development makes no sense, obviously. And we can go as well into what he did um, in his supposed trip once he got out of the tower to redeem himself. This is exactly what he did. He shows up in a prison cell, gets out of the prison cell. Then, in the day that Atsuki's and Shiori's friend died due to his actions, the death was actually related to a gas leak in the heater of of a store. So what he does is he calls the owner of the store from a private number, I'm assuming, and tells him to not use the heater today. That's it. That's his genius plan to prevent that girl from dying. Like, I cannot even, I don't even have words to describe how beyond idiotic this resolution is to the problem. Bro, he could have literally just went to the store in person, told the owner he smells gas, and the owner would notice and remove the heater. What he accomplished is basically nothing because the owner thought he was some random weirdo annoying him and just ignored what he said. And he was always going to end up like that. Like, these characters make perfect planning for their escapes, extremely logical. And then something as basic as this, and they're just completely stupid. Beyond stupid, actually. Like, what the hell is this? And then the other thing it is in his redemption tour is he actually starts tailing Shiori, ends up getting arrested, and that's it. That's his redemption tour. That's all he does. So not only does his redemption tour not earned, doesn't make any sense. We don't see his character develop into that. No, we just get told that he feels bad for it, and I guess that's it. That's what he does. He feels bad. Great. What does he do? In his redemption to redeem himself, he does nothing. The stuff that he does do, idiotic decisions. So his development doesn't make any sense. It's inconsistent. It's not good. Not good writing. And to make it even worse, the actions that he does do to try and somehow undo a little bit of the damage he did is completely stupid and achieves nothing. As for Shiori's development, this development is something that happens on chapter 3. And it's an interesting development where she basically has to choose between saving the friend she had in the past that died in the explosion, but that would come at the cost of her having to live alone for the rest of her life due to the shenanigans of the powers we're talking about. She could save her, but instead she would have to live alone and never see Atsuki, her best friend, ever again, nor the friend that she just saved. She would never be able to see them again. Basically, she would live alone without any other people she cares about. And that was a good development. Unfortunately, there's two issues. It takes too long. I'm gonna get to chapter 3 later, but it takes excruciatingly long to get there. Way too much for that sort of development. That development also ends up getting muted because her decision ends up not mattering, because she never actually ends up having to be alone. And again, I mean, I don't really mind the happy ending, but I mean, for a decision this big, where it's such a pivotal moment for the character, to all be undone within like the end of the same chapter, like all the resolution, all that strength that she had to muster, only for it to just not be relevant. I mean, I'll be fine if it was not like this, man. If it took a while for her to finally get a happy ending, for her to like regret her decision and not be able to do anything, or desperately try to undo what she did or whatever. But it doesn't happen like that. Like a decision doesn't matter because she's actually just able to straight up get the happy ending without having to sacrifice anything. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that development was pointless. And they spent like 5 hours on chapter 3 for it. Though, chapter 3 had another thing that chapter 3 wanted to convey. We'll get to chapter 3 a bit later. Before that, I guess we can talk about... I've been talking about superpowers from a stone for a while, and I mean, I haven't really explained how these superpowers work. Well, this stone, or rather, gem, or whatever, gemstone, is actually called a Sekimeiya, just like the title says. The Sekimeiya is basically a stone, gemstone, or rather, 3 of them, with... and this 3 is actually important for later, because it heavily changes the way you look at things. But I'll get to the number of stones later. Essentially, this story revolves entirely around finding out exactly how the Sekimeiya works. As I already talked about, most of the dialogue is about it, all discussions about it, inner thoughts are about it. Everything is surrounded. The mystery of this story is the powers of the Sekimeiya, which, in my opinion, is not a very exciting thing to find out exactly. I mean, in my opinion, the Sekimeiya, learning more about the Sekimeiya's powers, should have been used to then find the culprit, not having the culprits be used to find out more about the Sekimeiya. I think they have the priorities wrong here. Because I feel like in a mystery story like this, the main point of everything is to find the culprit, and for that you'd have to understand the powers. Not the other way around, like having the culprits and knowing the culprits to find out how the power works just feels like wrong priorities. Because the powers just don't feel like an exciting thing to go after, man. Like, they feel like the vehicle for the story, not the other way around. I feel like the writers definitely had their priorities wrong here. Furthermore, I mean, the powers of the Sekimeiya are ridiculously convoluted, like crazily convoluted. I'll get to them later. I mean, you probably will not understand anything that I'm saying unless you're noting it down, but I mean, you only really understand it after you slowly go through the story, and you know, just getting told how it works is probably not gonna allow you to understand it completely, but well. But yeah, it's extremely convoluted. I guess it makes sense. You'll be like that, since finding out how the Sekimeiya works is basically the whole point of the story. However, the powers and setting being so ridiculous convoluted, and not even consistent the entire time, makes the mystery basically less interesting to follow, really. I do think they should have done something simpler. Maybe. But at the same time, if it was simpler, it would be too easy. That's the problem. But yeah, this being this convoluted basically makes it impossible for anyone really to find the exact answer before it's given to you. Now, I know some smartasses that are watching this video will just claim that it's totally doable, bro. Only dumbasses with below 80 IQ are unable to find out, and I'm sure those tards are already typing their comments. And while yes, some of the parts are possible to decipher if you're very thorough with your noting, which again most people are not. But yeah, if you take note of at the very least the travels the main characters do, it's possible maybe for you to know. I'm not entirely sure if the game gives you the time every time at every relevant moment. I'm not sure. Does that happen? I don't know. I don't think it does actually. Because I don't think the game gives you the times at every single important moment, I feel like. But yeah. However, there's definitely parts that you're never gonna be able to guess before being told about the powers of the stone. No fucking way. I mean, I don't believe you if you say you did. There's definitely stuff you did not. You did not predict that. You did not get that before. And again, it's discovering it's not even cathartic. Again, it's just the power. Like, it's not that interesting to discover what this does. They try to basically then use what you learn about it to let you understand what happened throughout the story and what was going on through the story. But again, it's not as interesting because what they're using the new knowledge of the Sekimeiya for is to basically show you that actually this character traveled here with nothing happening. Actually, this character went there as well with nothing happening. Or actually, this character went there. And it's just basic movements of characters throughout the story that happened, yes, but they don't really ultimately mean much because those travels were irrelevant. Nothing happened in those travels, they just traveled. So it just doesn't feel cathartic learning all of this. So I guess I can explain a little bit how the Sekimeiya works. I mean, prepare yourself, start taking notes. But yeah, let me read this out loud. I have this here posted. Even though I said before, I already said before that the Sekimeiya is 3 stones technically. Well, in reality, there's only 2 Sekimeiyas. There's a third one that is a copycat. That third one was basically created by Jin, and Akaru was gonna use it to replace it on the exhibition stand in the process of stealing it. Basically, it would steal the real Sekimeiya and replace it with a fake one he brought over. The fake one has no powers, by the way. So, yeah, Akaru, once he sees that there's actually 2 stones, he actually gets shocked. He just takes one out and leaves his fake one inside. But yeah, there's actually 2 Sekimeiyas, identical stones. One of the Sekimeiyas basically makes you travel to the future, and the other one makes you travel to the past. As for where you show up when you use one of the Sekimeiyas, it's basically the opposite. Like, if you use the past Sekimeiya to travel X minutes to the past, you will appear X minutes in the past. In the same place, you will be X minutes in the future. Basically, X minutes after you use the Sekimeiya. So really, once you show up in the past, you're going to be exactly in the same place you will be 2x minutes in the future. And the same for the future. If you travel X minutes in the future by touching the future Sekimeiya, you will appear X minutes in the future in the exact place you were X minutes in the past, or 2x minutes before your current point in time. So basically it's the opposite, location-wise. It follows the opposite one. Now, this means that you can actually technically manipulate, and this actually happens a lot, the position where you'll appear when you use the past Sekimeiya. You can also kind of manipulate the one when you're using the future Sekimeiya. I mean, it's kind of harder to do unless you're consciously trying to do that. It's kind of a little bit harder, but yes, you can basically position yourself in the place you want to be X minutes into the future. You basically position yourself there X minutes in the past, so that you show up there once you travel from the future to the past. Once you travel to the future, I mean. You'll show up there again by manipulating it. With the past, it's a bit easier, since all you have to do is basically, in your mind, make the plan that you will be like in the storeroom X minutes in the future, and that's where you'll appear after traveling to the past, because there is a restriction to this, that your plan needs to be feasible. So you can't just say that you're gonna be outside the tower X minutes in the future to appear outside, because it's impossible for you to get outside. So it has to be something feasible. But yeah, you can just kind of manipulate where you'll appear like this by basically making a feasible plan that the universe agrees that is feasible in your mind, and then you're basically forced to actually do it and actually be in that position X minutes in the future. Then, moving on to the amount of time you actually travel. This is dependent on the amount of power the stone accumulates. So the stone is usually left in a refrigerated place because the cold actually locks the stone's powers away. So while it's in the cold, it doesn't gain any power. However, once you take it out of the refrigerated place, at room temperature, for example, the stone starts accumulating power. After a while, it turns on. It needs a little bit of time to turn on. But yeah, after it turns on, the longer it stays outside without being refrigerated, the more you end up traveling through time. I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't know exactly the equation, but it's exponential. Like, it starts off with the amount of time you wait is less than the amount of time you travel. Like something like, I don't know, 10 minutes gives you like 5 minutes of travel time in the past. It's not exactly that, but yeah, 20 minutes. But eventually, the time you wait ends up becoming less than the time you travel. And it's exponential, so after waiting like 2 or 3 hours, you're traveling days through time, basically. Another thing is that as the stone is accumulating power, it starts becoming hotter and hotter, which means that after a while you're basically burning yourself every time you touch it. Though, because of the way the time travel works, that burn is usually never really there. Especially when you travel to the past, the burn disappears completely because it's replicating the body you haven't had in the past, really. It's not really your body that travels through time, you're another body based on your existence X minutes in the past is created. So once you move to the past, there's actually 2 versions of you going around. Yeah, going to the future doesn't do anything. You just jump into the future, so there's no 2 versions of you. But yeah, once you touch the Sekimeiya, you need to touch the Sekimeiya to use it. It loses power and turns off for a while, slowly gathering energy, and you need to wait a little bit to be able to use it again. Once you travel through time, the Sekimeiya stays behind. By the way, you don't travel with it, it stays behind, falls on the ground, whatever it is, whatever. It is able to transport the Sekimeiya to pick it up as long as you don't touch it with your skin directly. You can basically transport it with the sleeves of your uniform, with some blankets, something like that. You can transport it like that without traveling, even if it's turned on. Finally, there's another thing. There's one final thing. That is the range. So as the Sekimeiya gets hotter and gains power, another thing happens is the effective range also increases. The effective range basically means that anyone within that range is going to be transported to the past or the future alongside you once you use the Sekimeiya, if the range encompasses them. So basically, if you touch the Sekimeiya with someone nearby and the Sekimeiya accumulated enough power so that their range includes the person next to you, that person is also going to travel in time alongside you. And this range continues growing without stop. We can grow to the point where it basically encompasses like an entire area of Japan and traverses 30 million people with it. So yeah, if you let that thing rack up power for long enough, you're gonna have issues, which is crazy to think about, considering that you supposedly get a good end. I mean, I don't see how there is a good ending with something that crazy running around. Someone was bound to make a mistake and touch it. Like, someone leaves it out of a refrigerated room, makes a mistake, and just disappears with half the Japanese population. But yeah, another thing to take into consideration that has to do with the range, though, is, as I said, there's 2 Sekimeiyas, one to the past and another one to the future, and both of them have their effective ranges. If, when you touch one of the Sekimeiyas, you're also inside of the range of the other Sekimeiya, like the other Sekimeiya is right next to it or is a bit further away but accumulate enough power to have an effective range so large that it encompasses you, like you're inside the effective range of both Sekimeiyas, when you touch one of them, you actually switch worlds or switch timelines. There's 3 timelines that you get that we see throughout the story. So yeah, you can switch in between. The timelines are slightly different because some events did not exactly happen the same way, and a lot of these timelines actually appeared due to changes that characters in the previous timeline made by traveling in time. So you have 3 timelines, and we actually, I mean, a lot of characters travel through a lot of timelines multiple times throughout the story, which you can actually kind of guess because you definitely see characters acting based on different knowledge, saying that certain characters should be dead, that they never saw them, they were never there from the beginning. You can kind of tell that. But yeah, I mean, keeping track of all the characters that are constantly switching is a massive pain. But yeah, as you switch through worlds, there's World A, World B, World C. The first chapter and the original world for us readers is World B. That's the first chapter. And as you world switch, you always world switch in the same order. So if you're on World A, you're gonna move to World B. If you're on World B, you move to C. If you're on C, you move back to A. However, there is an exception to this, and this is the last thing about the powers of the stone. That is, you can actually do the opposite order, and to do that, it's not even you that has to do it, but if someone is in World A and they world switch to World B, not through the natural progression, and you, while on World B, get caught in the inside of the range as well, inside of the area that covers that range in your own universe world. The Sekimeiya in your world may not even be there, but if you get caught on their range as well, even though you're not even seeing them touch it, you get teleported back to World A. You go in the opposite direction. So, I mean, yeah, it's pretty confusing because you need to basically be able to understand, to basically be able to not really understand, but to I guess understand exactly what happens. You need to keep track of basically the actions of every character through timelines, because their actions don't just affect the characters in their own timeline, but the characters from others, because they can be pulling them from their own timeline. So it's pretty crazy to be able to keep track of that's why I said everything matters, every action matters. And again, interaction between chapters, I feel like that's a step even beyond, because you need to go ahead and have the characters of every chapter in mind, because they're actually interacting with each other, not just with talking. With talking you can actually easily see it, but they're pulling each other from and to different universes. And I mean, there's no way you're figuring all of this out. I mean, you can maybe figure out that there's something related to future travel if you, again, take note of basically every travel and every time it happened. Maybe it's possible. There's no way you know that there's 2 different Sekimeiya though. No way you know that. There's no way you find that out. I don't think there's anything to indicate that there's ever 2. There are a point in time where, 2 Sekimeiya appear at once, but from the information you give, you're not gonna reach the conclusion that there's 2 actual Sekimeiya there. What you're gonna reach the conclusion of is that one of them was duplicated, multiplied. Like, you can actually duplicate items, and we see people duplicating keys, duplicating knives, duplicating a lot of stuff. So you actually just assume that the Sekimeiya was duplicated somehow. Not that there's actually 2 of them, or actually 3, and one of them doesn't work. You also would not assume that that one doesn't work, and it's a different one, because you just thought it was just turned off. Again, there's nothing to indicate that there's the fake one. Because again, the fake one and the real Sekimeiya, while turned off, are basically the same thing. Again, you're not going to be able to figure out all of this by yourself. And again, figuring it out is not exactly cathartic or interesting. So, again, the story just suffers from that. there's no real sense of progression either from chapter to chapter. That is another issue. Progression. You kind of just get stuck with the same knowledge from chapters 1 to 3. You basically get the main characters just discussing stuff, and it's always the same thing because people like Sai or Akaru or Katayu may know more, or Naomi doesn't really know more, but I guess she knows a little bit more, who may know more about this stuff, never tell anything about it, and the main character never gets led to believe that there's more to this. So basically, all the theories, the main character you're following, the theories always remain the same for us, the reader. So you don't really progress slowly, gain more knowledge of this. You see something else happening. Oh, okay. So it also works this way. No, you basically get stuck on the same conclusions all the way until the end of chapter 3, when you just get told flat out that actually future travel also exists. Then, yeah, chapter 4, you basically get background for basically the entire thing. You get to see what Akaru was doing before the event, what Kate was doing for the event, and that's basically it. And then chapter 5 is, as I said, the info dump math test. And as I said before, during the math test, going back to it, to actually answer all the questions, like I mentioned when I was explaining the powers of the Sekimeiya, you have to keep track of 24 characters and all of their movements, everything they do at all times, plus you need to interconnect their actions in between chapters. You need to know, like at 3 a.m. when character C world switched, if there was someone at 3 a.m. in chapter 1 also in that range that also world switched. You need to know that. And that is impossible to keep track of, man. Like, there's no way you're keeping track of that, man. There is no way. No way you're doing that. No way. Not to mention that those mysteries are not exactly that interesting. I mean, you could tell that world switches are going on. Like, the exact specifics you couldn't really tell. Because, again, you're not keeping track of all of it. But, again, keeping track of... Actually, that's the reason why you world switch. I mean, okay. That's not really that interesting. Also, having these 3 versions of the characters also don't really feel that interesting, to be honest, because they're basically the same, really. They don't really have any differences. The only differences they have is, again, differences in information and circumstances inside the tower. They're basically the same. I kind of wish they actually took advantage of the alternate universes to change the characters. I mean, I guess Atsuki is the only one that shows differences between chapters because he's more depressed in chapter 2. Because, well, because I'll go into it a little bit later. But all the others are basically acting exactly the same way. I guess Akaru is more violent in chapter 1, though it doesn't really make much sense why he's more violent in chapter 1 than in chapter 2. I mean, I don't know. Wouldn't Akaru just try to contact the new version of himself, especially since he's repentant, and try to get him to calm down? I guess that could be possible. We were never told that. But, I mean, if Akaru is really repentant, I mean, he should just prevent that Akaru from going into the tower at all. But overall, you don't really get any changes between characters. Again, wasted. You don't really get to see other sides that we never really saw in other chapters because they were keeping themselves closed off. And in a new chapter with new circumstances, you can actually get closer to them and get to know them better. That doesn't happen. So, I mean, they just exist once again for the mystery and for you to keep track of them. Moving on to writing quality, I'm gonna start with chapter 3 that I hinted at a little bit before. I mean, writing quality is okay. And again, the pacing is the issue. It's for me, it's the entire novel. I already talked about it, but in a very generic way, about the inner thoughts, basically just being about discussing the powers of the stone. Chapter 3, though, is a very specific thing. This is a part that I've seen a lot of people complain about, and I agree with them. But it's a very specific type of pacing issue. That it still has the issues of the inner thoughts of them just continuously discussing the powers of the stone. However, this chapter adds a completely random slice of life element that just comes out of nowhere, really. I mean, we just get out of the tower and we follow Shiori in a multiple hour long slice of life section. And you're probably asking, didn't I say that the slice of life section at the beginning of chapter 2 showing us the backstory of Atsuki and Shiori was actually very good and we should have had more? Well, that's true. That slice of life section was 15 minutes. This one went on for hours, first of all. Second of all, again, I already talked about that development Shiori has here. It doesn't need to be that long, if that's all you're gonna give us in terms of juice. Third of all, we actually don't learn anything new, really, about the powers of the stone. We don't get anything out of this. There's no progression to the story, so again, we don't get any more background into the characters. Again, we get more about Shiori, as I already talked about. But again, all of that was at most 20 minutes. 5-6 hours of this. It's crazy to me. It doesn't make any sense. We just follow Shiori, wake up, go on a walk, come back home, sleep, wake up, make a meal, leave, get back home, make a meal, sleep. That's what we get here. She doesn't have anyone to engage with, any character, any friend, nothing. We don't have any interactions. I mean, we do have some, but they may as well not have been interactions. It's basically just robotic interactions with a store vendor or with a random guy to get information about the stone. And again, we don't get any new information. So we just stopped the entire game for 6 hours. We stopped the entire plot from moving forward for like 6 hours. And we gain absolutely nothing out of it. Again, we have that development for our character, but it ends up getting invalidated first of all, and that development could have been done in 20 minutes. So what was the point of this entire third chapter, where nothing happens, nothing progresses? Well, the point of this chapter was actually to set up a plot twist at the end of it, with the future travel, because she's basically convinced the entire time that she actually traveled to the past, and in reality she traveled to the future. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of this chapter, to basically lull you into a false sense of direction, and actually then, you know, kneecap you at the end. Actually, you went to the future, not to the past, and to shock you. And I mean, it's not a bad plot twist. I mean, convenient writing, but I guess that's how you do in mystery novels. You need to go ahead and leave out some leeway for yourself. You can't just, you know, throw everything at your face. I mean, it's a decent one, but it's not a plot twist that requires 6 hours of setup, of boring slog slice of life, of seeing Shiori make a meal and eat it and leave to go on a walk. It doesn't justify 6 hours of that, man. Like, no way. I mean, at most 1 hour. This section could have been at most 1 hour. There's no way to justify this, man. This was horrible to read through. And even with the story already being as slow-paced as it was, like, that is a genuine, visible drop in pace. Like, it's crazy. The story is already slow. It just slows to a crawl here. Another thing that I noticed is that this slow pace, actually sometimes they decide to just throw everything at the wall and just advance things like nothing, like never before. Like in chapter 2 actually, we have a character, and instead of actually filling the space, and this character, the 9th character, I mean, I feel like they could have used more of that space. I would have preferred actually if they used more of that space to make us learn more about the character, because that character only appears in chapter 2 really, and we barely get to see that character again. So I would appreciate if you actually get to spend more time with them, but no, she basically skips half of the day because she just goes to sleep. And that's it. That's it. So it's just inconsistently applied, this pacing. Next, we go for the main analysis of this review, that being the world building and wasted opportunities. And I'm just gonna go a little bit faster here. I have them noted down, so It's gonna be a bit quicker without me rambling as much. So first wasted opportunity, we have the fact that the Sekimeiya is never properly explained. We don't know what it is, where it came from, how it came to exist, how it has such overpowered powers, how did no one find it before? For a story that is completely revolved around finding out how that stone's powers work, to not even give us a little bit of a clue as to where exactly it came from, and now they even exist, is just certainly a choice, I guess. I mean, you don't need to explain everything. A lot of times leaving some stuff vague is good, but in this case you had to give us something else, man. Like, the entire point of the story is the Sekimeiya. You don't even explain anything about it. You had to give us something, man. They don't tell us if he was ever used in the past, or if he was the first time he was ever found, if he came from Earth or from space. And the main problem I have with this is with the way time travel works in this story. In reality, what happened was the main character came from the future with the Sekimeiya and dropped it on the ground in the place where he was found. But if that was the case, then where did the stone originate from? It basically has no point in origin, because the point in origin is the main character in the future bringing it back here, and he only has the stone in the future because he was found here. So where the hell did that thing come from? Honestly, it doesn't make any sense. It should not exist. This doesn't make any sense. How did it get here in the first place? Doesn't make any sense. We have no information about it either. So that's the first wasted opportunity and the first plot hole, in my opinion. Then the relationship between Shiorya, Atsuki, and the ninth person, called Miya, that I've been talking about all this time, is barely explored, and this is a massive shame. Honestly, a glaring issue, really, considering two of these three characters are actually main characters, and saving Miya is actually the main reason Atsuki and Shiorya get themselves involved with all the dangerous stuff related to the Sekimeiya. So yeah, saving Miya was basically the entire point of the story for the main characters, and we barely get any interaction between the three of them outside of the early backstory they give them to know exactly what happened. We barely get to see it. They barely get to interact with each other. The quick slice of life backstory with those three together showed more emotion and character for them than the entirety of the rest of the story. Adding on to that, it seems a bit crazy to me that the writers did not have some massive character drama here between the trio. They literally laid the foundations for it in the story, with Miya admitting in her own thoughts that she never even liked Shiroya in the first place, and she was only friends with her because she actually liked Atsuki and was only putting up with her and thought that she was in the way, and that Shiroya, during chapter 3, while not being as aggressive as Miya, also thinks and ponders if becoming friends with Miya was actually something she even liked or saw as a positive, or if she actually deep down preferred the times when she was alone with Atsuki. Yet despite these foundations, this is something that never gets built up upon. Shiori and Miya have zero interactions the entire game. This is unbelievable, man. How is this even possible? They don't interact once the entire game. A big point of the story should have come with the point of with Atsuki having to decide, making a decision between saving Miya and ending up discarding Shiorya, or leaving Miya to die like it happened originally, and continue living with Shiorya, or rather going to get to Shiorya that was alone and saved both of them. It should have been actually also a choice for the player. This, an example of something that could have been a player choice. It would have been a massively emotional moment. The point in which the main character thinks he saved his one friend, For example, Atsuki does something to save Miya, only to realize that Shiori died instead, and in some sort of, tragic karma. Or the moment that he chooses to let go of Miya and restore the world back to normal, with Shiori alive instead. Miya also, as I said, should have had far more screen time than she had. Again, chapter 2 goes by way faster than chapter 1, precisely because she sleeps through half of it. Which just makes us not really care about her and not even know much about her, besides the fact that she's a psycho. Really, that's all we know. And again, that's another massive wasted opportunity. Furthermore, we also have the cabin that Atsuki and Shiori mentioned right at the beginning of the game, that both said to have played in while they were kids. It was talked about the entire story, specifically relating to the fact that they heard that the Sekimeiya were actually found right next to that cabin. That's why they start reminiscing, promising to go back to there together. We actually get to hear about the cabin, the whole story. We actually do see it, but we never actually get to see Atsuki and Shiroya actually going back there. They should have been the final chapter. The final image should have been there in the cabin together. To actually, finally, do the final loop and tie everything back together. It should have happened that way. Why are you setting that up if you're never gonna allow them to go back to there together? Furthermore, if they were going to make the Sekimeiyas appear right at the door of that cabin, like what happened, why did they not tie the Sekimeiya's existence to Atsuki and Shiori? Which was exactly what I was expecting them to do originally. Like, if they were found there, maybe that had something to do with what Atsuki and Shiori did in their past as children. Maybe they had contact with the Sekimeiya, and tying this all back to them, since again the entire story of the Sekimeiya seems to be tied to them regardless, since their friend also died in an incident related to the Sekimeiya when the Sekimeiya was being bought by the Ashio family. I thought they were just going to go ahead and make the trio just related to the Sekimeiya from the beginning. That's what I thought they were going to do, which never materialized, and I feel like that's another wasted opportunity. The Ashia family itself was also wasted. They started the story creating the idea that everyone hated them, that they had an unknown darker side to them. That's why they did not have a good image in the village. Yet we don't get to explore anything about them, and what we learn about them is minimal. Their existence virtually doesn't affect the story in the slightest. We only know one character from the Ashio family, that is their representative, that is outside, waiting for the doors to open, and even that representative doesn't seem to know much. She doesn't even know that there's a hidden door in the storeroom. She doesn't even know that. Kate does, by the way. So in essence, they really serve no purpose besides getting us some context as to what exactly is going on in the battle between Ashia, the Sekimeiya, Jin, and Kate. They basically, there's nothing. It makes the world building less interesting and discards the groundwork they built about the family at the beginning of the story, which I thought was going to be way more prominent. As I said before, we have two characters now. One of the characters I mentioned before, was the representative tied to the Ashes, and then there is also Naomi, which was also tied to the Ashes. Since the Ashes are useless, Naomi is also kind of useless, even more useless than the representative. But again, neither of these two are given any role. I already talked about the representative before, and as for Naomi, well, I also talked about her before. She basically does nothing. The entire story just gets killed. What I thought about before, considering Naomi was supposed to be the most trusted employee of the Ashia, was that Naomi getting killed early was actually not exactly just for the sake of having someone to be killed. It was actually being used as a storytelling mechanism to give us progression, since, She dies early in chapter 1, she dies early in chapter 2, though in chapter 3, though we finally get to have Naomi alive. And she reveals us a little bit about the Ashia family, some more details about the Sekimeiya, and it's basically a slow progression building upon itself, upon the different circumstances. You get to see Naomi alive for longer, and you get rewarded with more information by having her alive. And yet, though, I mean, at the end of the day, her deaths were just used for the mystery once again. You could have replaced Naomi's death really with anyone else, and it wouldn't have mattered, since again those deaths were only really that for the mystery of the movements of whoever the hell was killing her. It was never really used with any storytelling intent, really. And overall, again, Naomi ended up being an empty character all throughout the story, precisely because of that. Like, 2 of her virgins get killed in chapter 1, like extremely early. And the third one is basically dead and just wakes up at the end. So all of them are dead, fundamentally. They're dead the entire game. Another issue with the Ashia family is that they really don't seem to have a fixed idea of what they want to do. They either do not want the Ashia family to not be relevant, or do they want it? Because I cannot tell what they were actually trying to do here, because in which chapter was it? Chapter 4? Was it chapter 4? After the Ashia had it anymore at this point, they were backstory about the Ashia family. And again, why? I know I was complaining a lot about them not giving us background to anything, but again, if the Ashia family is relevant to this story, why are we giving them screen time instead of giving screen time to the characters that matter? I don't get it. It just reeks of indecision, exactly what they wanted to do with the story. And this backstory, the thing that this backstory is I mean, it further reinforces that the Ashia family was engaged in some dirty businesses. Yes, we already knew that. We didn't need to see it get thrown in our faces. We did not need to be told or shown. We already told that they were engaging in bad business. But the thing is that it actually just brings more questions than answers. I mean, the real reason why they made this backstory was basically to justify the existence of the hidden room in the storeroom that nobody seemed to know about. Though, again, I don't think an entire backstory was required to justify the existence of that storeroom. I mean, I could hold my disbelief enough to actually believe it existed without the backstory justifying it, to say that actually the Ashia family used it to run away whenever they were being confronted by the police, so that they were not found. Yeah, I mean, I could probably guess that's what the hidden room was for. I don't need to be reminded with the backstory. The issue, though, here is that they actually confuse us more than they give answers here. In the process of doing this, they actually show us some weird superpower from one of the members of the Ashia family. The whole situation was that there was a girl pointing a gun at him, and the kid sighs and says that, "Oh man, I'm gonna have to do that, to use that thing again." And then we get back to that situation, that it cuts to black. When we get back to that, we see that the girl ends up with a gunshot in her head, and the kid was totally fine. And so, how exactly did that happen? We don't know. I thought this was actually going to be set up for something in the story, like the Sekimeiya, like the Ashes had the Sekimeiya for a while, but that's instantly dismantled later because the Sekimeiya family, or rather, not even the family, the Sekimeiya business, since the blood family was basically removed from the Sekimeiya business, just buys both of them. So they never really had it before. They didn't even know the powers. So that was instantly removed. But it felt like they were hinting at the possibility that they had that thing. Because how exactly? I mean, we had this superpower that we've been building the entire story upon, and then we see a kid do something supernatural like this. It's obvious to assume that it's the Sekimeiya, but apparently it was not, and it was never explained. So I don't know what to think about this. Um, I thought they were basically gonna start, but the thing is, it was also all actually it was very early on. I still think it was early on enough for us to start pivoting into that direction. That's why I thought that had been the case, but maybe it was already too late for that. I don't know exactly. But once again, this just reeks of indecision. Like they wanted originally to the Ashia family to have a bigger part in the story and for them to have had the Sekimeiya for a while, and they just decided not to use any of it. Like what I thought originally was going to happen is that the Ashia family had one of the Sekimeiyas, and that's how they rose to prominence so fast. Which they also tell us they rose to prominence out of nowhere. They had one of the Sekimeiyas, and using it, they were able to abuse the powers to rise to prominence, and that's also what the kid used to basically kill the girl who was trying to kill him. And the other Sekimeiya was the one that the main character and Shiroya and Natsuki found near their cabin. Which would then basically tie both of them together into the powers. Both the Ashia family and Atsuki and Shiroya would be tied together, maybe even Miya would all be tied together to one individual Sekimeiya, basically. That's what I thought was going to be the case. It's also going to be interesting how the intersection of both, because the main Atsuki and Shiroya would actually vaguely remember the stone, but then they're also being told that the Ashes also had the stone. So what is going on in that? They would discover there's actually two Sekimeiyas instead of getting that told to us in the questionnaire. Another thing that I thought they were actually building upon was actually Sai being that kid that used the Sekimeiya's powers to kill that girl. Because, I mean, with all the knowledge Sai seemed to have, it just made sense. That he, I mean, I thought from the beginning that even his name seemed somewhat similar to Ashia. I thought they were trying to go in that direction, but he was never meant to be. But yeah, I thought Sai was actually that kid that we actually spent a little bit of time with in that backstory of the Ashia family. We actually would have gotten a backstory for a character. Crazy, right? And Sai's dubious mentality would also be explained by the fact that he is actually part of that extremely dirty and dangerous family. And the reason why he would have been inside of the building as one of the earliest people would have been the fact that he knew about the Sekimeiya and that his family had used it a lot. But when the blood family of the Ashias were phased out of the company, they also lost access to the original Sekimeiya, and now the reason why he wanted to steal it so much was because he wanted it back. And they would explain these irrational actions of trying so damn hard to get it more than anyone else. And when he gets that, he finds that two of them actually exist, which would leave him completely confused and stumped. But yeah, we'd be able to get to learn to unveil this mystery through Naomi, through the representative of the Ashia family, and through Saya, which would know stuff about the Ashia family that neither of them would know because he was actually part of it. Again, this also didn't happen. I also feel like it was a wasted opportunity, and I feel like there was something they were also planning on building upon that they never really used. So overall, I feel like unveiling the mystery of the Sekimeiya should have been tied directly to unveiling the mystery of the Ashia family and the contradictory statements of both Naomi and the representative and Sai then, as well as the backstory and past and connection between Miya, Atsuki, and Shiorya. I mean, basically making the superpower work for the story rather than the other way around, and connecting everything to the characters involved rather than what happened, that is basically making the characters move at the mercy of the powers. One last thing, I feel like there's another character that was not used to its fullest potential, and that's Veisud. This is actually a minor character that was a cop that was supposedly outside on the day the attack happened, and is sent back to the past because he's caught up in the range of the Sekimeiya when Ayla also uses it. To go back to the past, weeks before the event, he makes a post online describing what he saw. He gets called crazy. One of the people that called him crazy was Sai. And again, this ties back to Sai actually knowing the powers of the Sekimeiya. He would have been calling him crazy, not just because he thinks him crazy, but to shut down the discussion completely and prevent anyone from actually even getting curious about the identity of the stone, because he knows it actually works. But I digress. I feel like it should have been more stuff done with him. The only thing he was used for was having a very small conversation with Shiorya, where nothing new was learned. I mean, we never really got to see him in action in the story. I mean, as soon as I saw, yeah, the sprite, I thought he was going to be used, like maybe in another chapter. But again, because chapter 3 was used for the plot twist that future travel also exists, it basically became an impossibility to use him like that. Because what I thought was going to happen is that somehow that conversation with Shiorya would basically lead him down a different path if she actually went to the past. And in the next chapter, you would actually get Veisu trying to enter and actually managing to enter the tower. Which is also why I thought that when we saw a cop dead in the lobby, I actually thought it was Veisu. Because again, I didn't yet know that the future travel was a thing, so I thought that the changes or the kind of conversation she already had with him made him somehow learn about the entrance and allowed him to get in, only for him to get killed. But yeah, I feel like something more should have been done with this character, becoming a variable than a ninth person inside the tower. Also, by the way, I know they say that there's 8 characters in every dimension. You may be asking, well, if there's Mia and Shiorya, does that make it 9? Well, in the third timeline, meaning the timeline C, timeline of chapter 2, Shiorya disappeared in the explosion and Mia survived. So Shiorya is not there and Mia is. So there's only 8 people. Back to Veisu, yeah, he could have been the 9th person in the tower, creating for some new dynamics. I feel like he was kind of just wasted, man. Another thing to note, this is for the biggest visual novel connoisseurs, is that you can tell something about the Japanese atmosphere in this game is not exactly right. Like, this game takes place in a classic Japanese village. Not exactly classic, but yeah, the usual Japanese village life. They did a decent job trying to recreate, but something felt off to me the entire time. I don't feel like something was off. And when I learned that this was not really made by a Japanese studio, well, I mean, it clicked in my mind. There was something off there. I mean, if you're not really deep into this whole visual novel connoisseur atmosphere stuff, you probably will not notice it, but if you are, you definitely feel something is off. And yeah, overall, this visual novel feels more like someone had an idea about how a stone with superpowers could work. They basically created a stone with superpowers, and they wanted to use it in a story. They wanted an excuse to use it, so they basically built this entire thing as an excuse to use the stone with superpowers. They created the entire plot revolves around the stone and finding its powers, and everything just moves around it to basically let it create a mystery. I mean, the issue is, though, this is not a mystery that you're posting online for people to solve. This is a story, and the story has stuff like storytelling, which was not exactly the greatest, characters, which were terrible. It has world building, which is almost non-existent. So, I mean, overall, I mean, analyzing this as a story, which is how is this is supposed to work. Since this is a story, visual novel is a story, a book, an interactive book. I mean, and the mystery is okay. The powers are fine. They were not implemented well though into a story. As a story, I can only rate this like at most a 6 out of 10. Realistically, a 5.5 out of 10 is the rating I'd give it as a visual novel. And this is very harsh. I know it's not a 5 out of 10, but it's harsh because I'd say they did some things well, but they could have done so much better. They could have written a story so much better with the exact same plot device. It could have been so much better, in my opinion, so much more compelling, but they just wasted it, wasted everything, wasted all the characters, all in favor of the. They did not develop characters in favor of the Sekimeiya mystery. Wasted potential plot lines for no reason. Could not really decide themselves. Were indecisive in whether or not to use certain things or not. Overall, I feel like a rewrite of this could absolutely turn this novel, visual novel, into almost a masterpiece. I doubt that's ever going to happen, but yeah, these are my thoughts. A very long thoughts, like damn, I don't even know how long I've been talking, but yeah. I feel like that's it for this analysis. 5.5, maybe a 6 if you're generous out of 10. Sekimeiya. Sekimeiya. Sekimeiya the Spun Glass. 50 hours of my life spent reading it. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you liked, leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell button, and see you on the next one. I'm out.